Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Death Priestess Society podcast. My name is Freya Serafina, and I'm really excited to be bringing you another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about death as an opportunity for change. And we're also going to talk a little bit about death goddesses, or dark mother goddesses, or goddesses that usher in some kind of transformation. And less so about specific goddesses by name, for example, but more about the kinds of goddesses and the kind of divine feminine that exists when we tap into something quote unquote darker. So I'm really looking forward to this episode. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, obviously. That's why I'm doing this podcast. But also, it's usually or can be, oftentimes I found that talking about these kinds of um, sovereignty goddesses and these darker goddesses are sometimes scary for people. And I really, really want to break that stigma because when we let something die, we let something be reborn or birthed for the first time. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's jump into it. So, across cultures, timelines, and religions, there are a multitude of goddesses who stand at the threshold of death. Their domain may be the underworld, the cremation grounds, or even the halls of Valhalla. Maybe they stand at the crossroads or the liminal spaces between life and death. They can sometimes be depicted as crones or hags. Maybe they are fierce with long, lolling tongues dripping with blood. Maybe the top halves of their bodies are beautiful, and the bottom is that of a long serpent's. They can be depicted as both demonic and divine, but that doesn't mean that we should fear them. Goddesses who stand at the threshold of death are guides to help us face our inner selves. These goddesses help us embrace our shadow and step into the deep and murky waters of self exploration and discovery. Yes, that can be scary to confront yourself honestly and wholly without judgment, but in doing so, we're given an opportunity to transform into a new version of ourselves. So we're getting close to Halloween, as we call it now. We're getting close to Samhain, which is um, the Celtic word for the new year, the celebration, the witch's new year, this harvest, this time to turn inward. And I don't have the time and space to get into the etymology of the term Celtic in and of itself. I'm sure there might be some people listening thinking, well, what exactly does that mean? How are you defining it? Um, that would be a whole other class. But I'm going to speak, I'm using that term generalizing. But what I will say is that Samhain is an old Celtic tradition marking the turn of the wheel towards winter. So, sometime around November 1st to the 4th, depending on where the moon was positioned, was considered the new year and the first day of winter. It's also said that during the Samhain portal, the veil between the worlds is thin. Spirits walk the earth, ancestors come to visit more easily, and communication with the dead is abundant. So there are actually a lot of dates throughout November that are sacred and connected to different goddesses across different traditions. But I'm really concerned with the Samhain portal because it's given so much power and emphasis in our pagan culture. But there's something else I want to say about Samhain as well. Is traditionally speaking, Samhain wasn't always associated with your ancestors. It wasn't always associated um, with death in the way that we think about people who have moved on, people who have crossed over, our ancestors, our loved ones who are no longer with us. The death it used to really mainly be associated with is the changing of the seasons, the dying from the summer headed towards winter. And actually, in a lot of Celtic cosmology, as I'm learning now in one of my PhD courses, a lot of Celtic cosmology states that from Samhain on into the darker, deeper winter months is the time of women. So, what does that mean? So, the time of women is this magical, mystical, darker time where we get to turn inward, take a look at ourselves, take a look at our feelings, take a look at the things that we want to change or transform, and pause, slow down, breathe, take the moments, explore, assess. These shadowy, watery, emotional realms, that was the time and space and land for women and women's mysteries. And I found that to be really interesting. You know, some definitions or some explorations into that will sort of create a gender binary in the sense that in a way that might not be so wonderful. So, the summer is the months for men because they're outside and they're working in the fields and they're toiling away, and the winter months are the months for women because they're primarily concerned with aspects that are going on in the home. But if we leave gender roles out of it for a moment and we return to what that means on a more mystical and spiritual level, we're being invited to pause, to breathe, to take a moment, and to swim in the waters of emotion. And also, I think this provides us a nice opportunity to sort of mirror what's going on in the world outside. Now, I'm in the northern hemisphere, so it's fall right now going into winter. So that's the perspective I'm speaking from. But when we hit Samhain, we're given this really beautiful and compelling invitation to mirror what's going on outside of us, outside in the world, and let that reflect inside. So, what do I mean by that? So, the trees are dying, the leaves are changing, the flowers are going. We're getting into the last few weeks of harvest. Things start to become colder, bleaker, and people are more withdrawn and closed in on themselves. And I don't see any of that as being negative. I think that we've been sold this idea that, in the summer you have so much fun and you're out at the beach and you're doing whatever and you're partying it up, and oh, we should be so sad once winter comes because we don't get to have fun anymore. I don't think that's true. Aside from like all the holiday seasons and, consumerism and all of that, it's a time and space for pause and reflection. And I think that that has been so undervalued in our culture and in our society that we associate this death of everything, this pause, this holding space before rebirth as something negative. And I would like to change that. I'd like us to remember that sacred pause is one of the most beautiful things that we can do. So there is a Celtic goddess that I do want to speak of. Um, and I'm never going to say it perfectly, and I apologize to anyone who speaks Irish or Gaelic. The Kaya. So you might see that spelled Caileach. Sometimes I see, oh, two L's, excuse me. Um, and that would be the Kaya. And I want to bring her into the conversation as a guide. So when we think of the Kaya, we think of an old crone, an old cloaked woman who is so old she's often depicted as being near death. So sometimes she's referred to as the Veiled One, and she rules over the winter landscape and the harsh, cold winds of winter. So, as I mentioned, she often appears as an old crone cloaked in mystery. Her clothes are gray and she wears a shawl over her shoulders. Her skin is gaunt and bluish, like that of a corpse. She often is depicted as having a single eye in the middle of her forehead, which suggests that she has the ability to see beyond all time and space. So I like to think of that also as an inner knowing. If we're looking, we hear associations of the third eye being associated with inner knowing as well, and that's where her eye is often situated. So some suggest that the kayak's origins are actually pre-Celtic, and that she is older than time itself. And in some traditions, she's associated with wolves, and in others, she's a shapeshifter and has the ability to transform into a bird. So there are many people who fear the Kaya, or they just write her off as evil, but I don't think it's that simple. Um, there's this incredible thing that has happened throughout history um, as monotheistic, patriarchal religious traditions and cultures take over. Women's sacred mysteries have been transformed, rewritten, hidden, erased, absorbed into other stories. There's been plenty of syncretism between religions. And these sacred, divine feminine mysteries are often now reproduced in such a way that paint women as evil, as belonging to the devil, as sinful, um, or the other stories we get about women is that they could be overly sexual, and of course, using that as a negative connotation. Old women are just hags, and they're not worth anything. And I find that to be really reflective of all of the things that we now fear. We fear women with power. We fear women who are deadly. um, this shapeshifter aspect, women have this uncanny, beautiful ability to transform themselves if they're flowing with their cycle, if they're flowing with the cycle of the seasons. Um, I mean, within a month, women experience very different emotions up and down, sideways and backwards. And I think that is really reflected in this shapeshifter aspect as well. And also, women have had to shapeshift throughout time and space in order to survive and preserve themselves, their practices, and their beliefs. But when we look at a figure like the Kaya, the story is one of the many stories is that she rules over winter, and just as spring is about to break, this is like a very truncated version of this story. Please do look up stories of the Kaya. She goes down to the river and she washes her shawl. And if she's able to wash herself and her shawl in the river before a bird cries or a dog barks as the sun is breaking, she will then, her youth will be restored and she'll be transformed, and she'll be able to be allowed to live and continue on, and now she's this beautiful, beautiful being. And there's something in that story that is reflective of the cycles of life. So the Kaya is representing this death aspect, and she gets into the water and she's now then able to be reborn. And we're witnessing a cycle, a birth, life, death, rebirth cycle. This is the invitation of these winter months, of these quote unquote death goddesses, these goddesses of transformation. We can look at all of the stories about death goddesses, war goddesses, even um, creation goddesses, and we can trace where the stories were given patriarchal influences and how they have changed. And I'll get into some of that in some later episodes with particular goddesses as well. We could focus on how that's negative and damaging, and how those reproductions and those images of women have actually impacted women in our society today. Or here's another invitation. We can wade through the mist of the bullshit and we can get down to what is the story saying about birth, life, death, and rebirth. And how can I apply that to my life now in modern times? And that's what I'd like to do with the story of the Kaya. So what she does in winter is she is the ruler. She is the ruler of winter. And she's also an old hag, an old crone. She is death. She is fierce and cold, and she is hardened and withered with age, but she is wise. And her old age, her creeping towards death, her cold, wintry self and being has the ability to see through all time and space, has this inner knowing. And it's that inner knowing that I want to practice and mirror in these colder winter months. So it is easy, as I mentioned, to only see the Kaya and only see an old crone goddess that brings about the death of the land, symbolizing the onset of winter. But she also makes way for the land to transform. Death must take place in order for rebirth and regrowth to happen. The kayak paves the way for transformation. So I recommend lighting a candle on the eve of Samhain, leaving an offering for her, and thanking the kayak for the opportunity to go inward, so that we may meet ourselves and come out on the other side transformed. Now, that's easier said than done. And the whole point of this podcast, the whole point of any of my teachings and offerings is that I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy. You don't need a season. You don't need the winter. You don't need a Sabbath like Samhain. You don't need a holiday. You don't need a goddess. You don't need a dark mother goddesses that represent this threshold of death and rebirth and transformation. You don't need any of that to have gone through the process of death and transformation. We have little deaths every day in our lives. You know, you lose a job, you lose a friendship, you lose a sweater. It's your favorite sweater, and now it's gone. You lose your pair of shoes, or a piece of jewelry, an earring is gone. Right? Those not that losing your job is a little death, but those other ones are little deaths, right? You might have lost a partner. You might have lost a beloved pet. You might have experienced abuse or assault. You might have experienced a number of traumatic events in your life. All of those provide us with the ability to die. Something dies. And for a very long time in my life, I just sat with the death. There was no transformation. There was no rebirth or growth. There was just pain. There was so much pain. And sometimes it feels good to stay in pain. I'll speak for myself here, but sometimes when we're in pain and we've been in pain for so long and no one seems to get it or understand your pain, no one seems to care or truly empathize with what you're going through, you don't want to release the pain just yet. The comfort offered is not enough. It's not good enough. And we keep looking for comfort and the soothing of this pain outside of ourselves. We look for it in other people. And that's why, in my opinion, when you get into one bad relationship, you get into a few more until you're able to flesh out, understand, and transform whatever it is within you that is seeking the validation outside of yourself. Now, that's never going to fully go away, and I don't think that it should, right? You should be validated in some way, right? From your romantic partnerships, from your friendships. There is a give and take relationship in your work environment, in your home life, with your family, with whoever it is. But to rely only and solely on the comfort of others will leave you lacking in the ability to transform your life and let something new be born. And this is where these dark mother goddesses, these death goddesses come in. This is where remothering yourself comes in, reparenting yourself. I've seen beautiful ceremonies even of people who marry themselves and they seek that love and fulfillment from themselves. Not to say that they never go on and find a partner, right? But they take charge of their life and they make a commitment to themselves before they make a commitment to somebody else. And I think that's really beautiful. And I'm in a great relationship now, and I still kind of think it could be fun to marry myself in ceremony. I think that could be beautiful. But this is where these goddesses can come in to guide us. These goddesses that bring death, warrior goddesses, Kali, Hecate, the Kayach, the Morrigan, these goddesses that usher in change often do so under violent circumstances. It's not always peaceful. Winter is not always kind. Winter is harsh. Winter is cold. The winter landscape can be foreboding. And yet, it ushers in change like a strong, cold wind, like the kayak. These dark mother goddesses, they don't just bring death. Sometimes in their mythology, it is violent, literal, physical death. But they don't just give us an invitation for violence and death. No, they give us an invitation to cut, to clear, to wipe, to get rid of. They say, move all this shit. What do you want? What do you want, and what are you going to do about it? This is dead. This is not working. Whatever you're doing, it's not working. What are you going to do about it now? How are you going to take charge of your life and yourself now? This is the opportunity that they provide us with. So it doesn't have to just be cold and sad and scary, but it might be at first. It might be at first cold and dark and scary. And then you have a choice. Do you continue to sit in the pain? Do you continue to sit in the pain and let all of those people that have caused you pain continue to win continue to control you, to continue to have such an impact in your life that you feel stuck? Or do you lean into the wisdom of the Dark Mother goddesses, of the Death goddesses, of the Threshold and Transformation goddesses? Do you lean into the wintry aspects of life and sit with what's going on and then move past it? Now, here's another metaphor for you to think about with winter. You can't, typically speaking, there's not much planting to be done in winter. There's not much tending to the soil to be done in winter. There isn't life blossoming and blooming all around you. You have to sit and be reflective. Even water freezes over. It's under there, but there's a stillness that winter is asking from you. Before you can change and transform, you have to be still. You have to sit with whatever is going on inside of you. And you have to look at it, assess it, think, what is this? What do I want? How did I get here? Where do I go now? And lean into the enveloping love, the big cloak of the Dark Mother Goddess, of the Kaya, the cloak that can wrap around you, and sit in the stillness. But while you're sitting there, you're thinking, what's next? What seeds am I going to plant? What ideas am I going to nurture and tend to? What am I going to plant? What do I want for myself? And sit and listen in stillness and silence. And yes, it can be scary. It will most likely be scary, and it could be violent and painful. I always think of the Tower card in tarot, and the tower's being blasted, and the guy's like, yeah, he's like falling off. But the tower is just an invitation for death. Let that shit go. You must, or you will always be where you are. I have 3 invitations for you for this next week. This next week or 2 weeks. I pulled 3 cards. If you're looking on YouTube, if you're watching, you can see them. But I will read them, of course, for those of you who are listening. I pulled 3 cards because we're not all just the same people. We might need different things. And these are the 3 things that came forward. If you are not a journaler, that's okay. I highly recommend journaling, though. I know it can be really difficult to start, especially if you're like me and you need prompts. So think of these like your prompts. And if you're not a journaler, maybe you just speak to yourself in the mirror. You can answer these questions in the mirror. So the first one is your first journal prompt. You can see this card. We can't see it so well, so I'm going to have to read it anyway. The first journal prompt is, I forgive myself for ... I forgive myself for. This is a powerful invitation. I think sometimes we stay stuck where we are because we feel we deserve it. We feel we deserve it. Maybe we did something bad, quote unquote bad. Maybe we did something that wasn't great. Maybe we hurt someone. Maybe we made a choice that ended up hurting ourselves in the end. And so whatever punishment we're now receiving, we think we deserve it. I stayed in an abusive relationship for much longer than I should have because I thought I deserved it. I made some poor choices. I did some bad things. I behaved not great. Now, I could psychoanalyze myself and look at all the reasons for why that might have been. I'm certainly not at this point in my life blaming myself for any of that. But I was young and I blamed myself then, and I thought I deserved it. It took me until I was 31 years old, I'm only 32 now, to forgive myself. I held on to that pain and that guilt for over 10 years. I wonder how many opportunities I lost because I wouldn't let that shit go. I thought I deserved it. And so, yeah, my relationships after that were not good until I was able to forgive myself. So that's your first prompt invitation. Your second, I can better care for myself by ... I can better care for myself by. This is a big one. When we are continuously blaming ourselves for something, we are not caring for ourselves. When we are in the patriarchy machine, we need to care for ourselves. When we are work, school, work, school, work, school, or work kids, work cleaning, work whatever it is, we are not caring for ourselves the way that we should. And so I invite you to take a look at your daily practices. What are you doing on a daily basis? And what are you doing for yourself on a daily basis? Where can you invite joy? And what needs to, of course, be let go so that you can have more space for you? I just stepped down from a position at my job because I'm going crazy, because I'm going insane, and I'm having some physical ailments that I'm dealing with, and I'm not caring for myself. And if I continue to not care for myself, I am going to continue to hurt physically in my body. And it's really scary to step away from income, especially in this day and age. But I can't use that income if I'm dead. Literal physical death. So that's your second invitation. I can better care for myself by. And lastly, this is a big one. I forgive blank for ... I forgive blank for. Ooh, yeah. In the process of dying and birthing and healing, we're going to have to forgive a lot of people who we feel don't really deserve it. I know that hurts. I know it does. We're going to have to forgive a lot of people whom we never got closure from. You don't need it. You don't need it. I know you want it. My God, there's so many people that I want to look me in my eyes and apologize to me for all of the things that they've done. It's never going to happen. And if you hold out for that, you will never, ever move on with your life. Those people who you're waiting for an apology from, they don't give a shit, usually. They don't care. They've moved on and they're off doing whatever, hurting somebody else, hurting themselves, ruining lives. If you hold out for them, they still have a hold over you. You don't want that. I don't want that. In learning to forgive myself, I had to learn to forgive others. And that even included people who assaulted me. Now, you don't have to forget, and you don't have to ever, ever allow people back into your life who do not belong there. But forgiveness is not for the other person, and I know it's a cliche. I know it is. But it is for you. Forgiveness is not for them, forgiveness is for you. It truly, truly is. It will set you free. It will set you free. So those are your 3 prompts. Journal if that's your thing. And if it's not, it's really powerful to look yourself in the mirror in your eyes and speak to yourself. So do that. And let me know how it goes. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next time.